So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our October I Am Tech Oregon interview sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. I am Ruthie Ditzler, TAO's Marketing and Regional Programs Coordinator, and I use she, her pronouns. I have the pleasure of being the moderator for the 2021 I Am Tech Oregon series. And I'm super excited to talk with today's guest about the work she's doing to make jobs in the tech industry more accessible for students in our community. It's a subject near and dear to my heart, and I think it is awesome work. TAO's Kara Toronto is here with me today. She's helping to run things behind the scenes. She'll be keeping the conversation going in the chat. So if anything comes up, if you have any questions, feel free to direct them Kara's way. I know that we have all been on countless Zoom calls over the past year and a half, but basically everyone's on mute to start, and please remain on mute unless you have a question at the end and you'd like to unmute. We'll save about 7 or 8 minutes at the end for Q&A from the audience, and we certainly love to get audience questions. So you can post them in the chat during the conversation, and Kara will monitor the chat to make sure that we capture all of the questions at the end. I encourage you to engage with TAO on social media. I'm the person behind TAO social media, and I love to see comments and key takeaways. Anything that Alex says today that you think is awesome, put it on social media and share it with the world, and that would be great. And now it is my pleasure to welcome our October I Am Tech Oregon guest, Alex Hernandez, who is Senior Manager of Community Engagement and Talent Development at OpenSesame. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Ruthie, and thank you everyone for joining. I see some familiar faces on the call, so it's great to see you guys. Today's a good day for me. I was just saying as people were joining, after I get through some meetings today, I am going to Disneyland tonight. So I'm excited. Today's a good day.
Super awesome. So yeah, let's just kick it off, Alex. I'm glad that you're somewhere sunny. I'm all bundled up here in Portland, so you get to soak up some sun for us. But as I mentioned, you are the Senior Manager of Community Engagement and Talent Development at OpenSesame. That is a mouthful. So I'm wondering if you can start us off by just breaking down your role and talking a little bit about your day-to-day at OpenSesame.
Sure. So I've been at OpenSesame now for 9 years, and I haven't always done what I'm doing today. So I'll just start with what I got hired to do. In 2012, we were a scrappy startup, and there was a small number of us, and we were kind of wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things. I had just moved here from Los Angeles, and I went to college and grad school after taking quite a few gap years. So during school, I always had to bartend and wait tables, and I managed restaurants. And so I had a love for tech and a love for customer service, and those melded really well together. And I went on to grow and build the technical support team at OpenSesame. So for many years, I was working in the product and the technology and with our customers. About 3 years ago, I made a complete career shift and decided to take a chance and do something totally different and work with the people. And so now I'm working on the people team at OpenSesame. I do have a super long title in combination with also a super long name, Alexandra Hernandez. So depending on my audience, I often shorten it. But what it is essentially is I run and develop and manage the different programs we have at OpenSesame that support people looking to get into tech, people who are at our company, and so on. So we have, as early as high school, we have 2 programs, and then we have 4 programs for college students, including an apprenticeship. And then we have 2 professional development programs. One is a leadership development program, and one is an internal training program.
That's super awesome. And when we talked earlier, you mentioned that you have this sort of knack for wanting to attract people into the tech industry from all different areas, that you play this ambassador role.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about those different internship programs? I know that Step into Tech, for example, is something that could ideally be replicated in tech companies across
Yeah.
across the country. So tell us a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, so the program Step into Tech that Ruthie's talking about is one of our 2 high school programs. Essentially, it's a discovery and a confidence building program for students who might not otherwise have known or thought of themselves in tech or knew those jobs were out there. So we try to target underserved communities. We started initially in Portland. We've now broadened that to the entire US, and we match them with mentors who are essentially, they're kind of like guidance counselors. They're employees at OpenSesame across all teams that raise a hand to get involved in a student's life. And they meet with the student weekly, and they sort of develop a path for them to discover tech and discover different teams. And the other thing you were asking me about is so I kind of have this motto. It's like ABR, always be recruiting. So from my very beginning days at OpenSesame, I've always kind of inadvertently been recruiting folks to work there. And as a result, I've hired a ton of people. I did dabble in recruiting, and I'm doing some recruiting now to help out, but recruiting's not my passion, but I guess I'm good at it. So I've hired a lot of people.
That's awesome. I mean, if you're good with people and you can bring them onto your team and like build out this amazing team around you, that sounds like a really fun skill to have. Can you give, on the side of developing Open Sesame's own people, can you give some examples of some of the internal professional development programming that you run?
Sure. So every employee at OpenSesame is given a bucket of money, not a bucket of money, but a bucket of like, in addition to their salary, a budget to spend on professional development, including some 40 hours, so a week of time where they can choose something to do that will develop them professionally. We also have an internal programming called Open Sesame Qualified, which is essentially modeled a lot like college with 100 and 200 and 300 level courses, and you make your way through each level each year you're at Open Sesame by doing a number of courses, some book reading. This year the thing that I'm doing is about giving back, and so the product we sell at Open Sesame is something that we say, take our training and you'll have the world's most productive and admired workforces. So we have to live that ourselves at Open Sesame. So we're all about professional development and training and upskilling.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's, this training, this company that your product is training is then really walking the walk around your own employees and training future employees, which is super cool.
I always tell high school students, because I work with so many of them, I say, you probably don't want to hear this right now, but the traditional model of high school, maybe college, and career is no longer. It's high school, maybe college, career, keep learning, keep learning, keep learning.
Yep, like evolve, new job, try this. And it sounds like you like model that as well, taking this risk where you jumped from the product side into doing something with people. Clearly a skill you've always had, but kind of leveraging skills in a different way to do something completely different within the same company. It's a really cool example of being able to pivot.
I'm lucky because I have really good leadership that saw those qualities in me and asked me to take a risk, and of course it was scary, because if something happened with Open Sesame, what does that look like for me on paper? But really ultimately what it has done is added skills to my toolbox.
Super awesome. Okay, so I am curious, throughout your career, this series is focuses a bit on identity and sort of understanding how a person's identity affects their, the role that they play in the tech industry and the experience that they've had. And so I'm wondering, throughout your career, have you seen yourself represented among your peers, among leadership at the companies that you've worked at? And sort of what are your insights about that?
Not always, of course. I won't disclose my age, but I'm not young. And, sadly, especially in tech, not always, not a lot of representation, but it is changing. And there's a real effort across not just technology, but companies, around the world for change. I think what's going on right now, including representation in tech is not a moment, it's a movement. And Gen Z, although they might get a bad rap, they won't stand for it any other way. They're just not going to go work at those companies where they don't see folks like themselves. So, this is a movement and it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Young people are so cool. Let's do everything we can to support them. Awesome. What about my favorite question is about imposter syndrome. Is that something that has come up for you in your current role or in previous roles in your career?
Of course, yeah. One thing that is good about getting old is you kind of care less about that stuff than when you were younger. But I think it's a real thing. And to say, oh, don't have that or you shouldn't have it is ridiculous. I think a better approach and something that's helped me is to really dig into it, right? And know thy enemy. So, watch TED Talks about it, read blogs about it, listen to other people who have had it and have overcome it. So I would never say don't have it. It's not real. I would say just, dig into it.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you mentioned before too, that when you're sort of recruiting people or talking to people about coming on board, like to not discount, and with high school students too, to not discount where you're coming from and your lived experience. Mm-hmm. And that so often, you were saying that's the experience that companies want on their teams.
Absolutely. People, especially young people, tend to get caught up in the skills that they don't have. And I always tell them, like, think about what got you here and where you came from and what brought you to this moment, because you're exactly right. In the grand scheme of things, it matters overall to the culture of a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great thing to keep in mind. I think to boost confidence when you're looking for jobs or thinking about pivoting into a new role, it's so often like, oh, am I good enough for this job or do I have the right skills? But
right.
Really, like, the reframe is like, what is the unique experience that you have that this company would be lucky to have on their team? Mm-hmm. For sure. Mm-hmm. What do you like best about what you do?
It's definitely working with young people. It can be challenging at times, and this is a difficult time to be a teenager. If y'all remember what it was like to be a teenager, let's add global unrest. The earth is on fire. There's a pandemic on top of all of that, and Zoom fatigue and everything else on top of being a teenager. So just being able to be there for them and show them that there's opportunity for them and watching them grow. There's some students now that I've been able to work with all through high school and who are now into college, and just seeing the people that they've become and is so rewarding.
That's awesome. How do students get recruited into the Step Into Tech program? How do they find out about it originally?
Yeah, so we did a lot of outreach to public schools in the area. And now that it's countrywide, I ask employees in different parts of the country to reach out to schools. We have scripts that we send. Initially, we weren't getting a lot of feedback at all, and no one was answering me. And I felt like I was just kind of emailing out into the void until one day, one of the parents at OpenSesame said, I was in a school meeting and your name and picture came up on the wall. Step Into Tech. And I said, oh, okay, somebody's reading my emails. So it's been word of mouth. And then I also have the pleasure of working with Jeremy, one of my Step Into Tech interns, for a month now. And he's gotten into the program, and he noticed that we need to do more outreach, not only to companies to adopt similar programs, but also to schools. And he's just been amazing. He's been on the phone, and he called you guys. Like, he's just incredible because he really believes in this program. So it's wonderful to work with him.
That's awesome. Speaking of Jeremy, if you're interested in learning more about the Step into Tech internship program from a student perspective, he just shared a guest blog post on TAO's blog. So I think Kara will pop that link into the chat if you're curious to read more from his perspective. Okay, so favorite thing is working with students and developing them. What is something that you regret about your career or that you would do differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I actually I'm not at home right now because I'm on my way to Disneyland, but I have a post-it on my desk at home, and it says, "Don't be part of the furniture." And what that means is, for many years in my career, I would just kind of not speak up, or I'd let people speak over me, or I'd be intimidated to share my opinion, or whatever it is. And when you start out that way, often in a company, like for example, when I worked at NBC and I was thrown into like these big board meetings, and I wasn't really equipped with a lot of information, and so I would just stay quiet, and then that just became like what I did. I just wouldn't speak up. And so I really regret not just opening my mouth and saying something like most people are comfortable doing. So, my advice there is, don't be part of the furniture. You always have something to contribute. There's a reason that you're in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just the same way as like, what is that lived experience that you bring to the team? I mean, bringing that same lived experience into every meeting. Yeah, easier said than done, but I think that that's a great thing to keep as a reminder. I love that you have that on your computer.
Yeah.
So you have a pretty, the series is all about exploring different roles in the tech industry and understanding how people came to find themselves doing that particular job. I'm curious if someone aspires to be in a similar role as you, doing kind of talent development, how should they get there, or what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think two parts. My first answer would be to get into tech, because I think it's worth noting that for the college internship this summer, we had 1,000 applicants.
Wow.
which is even more of a reason to have programs like Step into Tech, so that kids can get a leg up earlier on. And so my advice is just getting into tech, because knowing that the barrier can be quite steep at times, is even if you think you want to, let's say, be a computer engineer, there's only going to be so many engineering spots open. Definitely go for those positions, but also think around those positions. Like, is there a content position? Is there a blogging or a data mining or something? Like, think outside of the box just to get in the door, because once you're in the door, you can, there's a lot more opportunity. For someone who's thinking about going into the people side of things, I would say, there's a lot of associations online that you can join to learn about efforts in HR and in people development. I would say also mentoring. If there's a mentor program in your area where you can work with high schoolers or middle schoolers, mentoring is always a good thing. Come to things like this, log on to TAO and see what's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And especially, it sounds like you're a great example of coming into a company doing one role and then having these strengths, that you want to use, and having the support once you're in the door to switch to a different role.
It can be discouraging, right? Because there's another example I have where there was an intern who's a marketing major, and she wanted to go into marketing, but there weren't a lot of marketing roles. So she took a chance and did another role, and now she's actually leading a team, a couple of years later. So I know it seems like, well, I went to school for one thing, this is the only thing I want to do, but just be thinking adjacent to that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so we have one more question, and then we will open it up to our audience members. So be thinking, audience members, about questions that you have. If you could share one piece of wisdom that's benefited you in your life and your career, what would it be?
Right. Well, it would be to always be kind. Especially now, be kind. That's the number one thing. Being flexible is also super helpful. You just have to pivot in today's work. You have to be able to sway. And then finally, I would say, no ego. Keep your ego out of your decisions and your thought process. Like, just no ego.
Wise words. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open it up to the audience, and we have a small crew here. So if you have something, if you want to come off mute or, and ask Alex directly, that's totally fine with us. We're just going to keep things within Zoom today instead of using Mentimeter like we have in the past. So I'm not sure, Kara, if there's anything that's come up in the chat. I haven't been looking, but does anyone have a question that they want to ask Alex?
I haven't seen anything in the chat, but I was gonna ask Alex, because she and I have talked about this, and Jeremy has talked about this. Jeremy and I talked about this too. My favorite part of talking to Jeremy, he was like, I didn't even know these jobs existed. And I know several of you on this phone call work with students and have made that comment too. I'm curious, Alex, like OpenSesame has grown, you're big, you've got folks that can function in the mentor role. How would you suggest other companies do this? Because I see some awesome other CEOs on here like Dan and Aaron. And I'm curious, like, what advice would you offer for somebody to replicate the program? And I know we have the blog, but like you do it logistically every day.
Yeah, I mean, we would be more than happy to meet with whoever and provide a framework, including some free courses on OpenSesame for your interns to take around just, behaving in an office etiquette, email etiquette, emotional intelligence, those kind of soft skills. But, the first and foremost is that there needs to be buy-in at the leadership level. There needs to be, it needs to come from the top that you want to give opportunities to students. That's the number one thing. And then there needs to be a set of stakeholders that raise a hand and say, yes, I'm okay. And honestly, like the commitment is really small. Once you have the program in place, the commitment is meeting with the mentor once a week and then aligning them with some goals. And then it's really self-led after that. And so they're either working, in our case, they're working on courses, they're working on projects with other interns, they're just looking into careers that they might be interested in doing research. So it's less about them getting work done for your company, although they're totally willing to do some of that work. It's more of an exploratory, and that's why I called it like a guidance counselor relationship. So if someone on your sales team says, sure, I'm happy to take an intern, and the intern gets there and wants to do engineering, that's fine. The sales team can create opportunities for that intern to sit in on engineering meetings or read a book on Python or you name it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's what Kara was saying earlier, it's just like how cool it is to have this opportunity, like within a corporate setting, to be able to work directly with students, because I know so many of us don't have that in our day-to-day. So just kind of taking on having the support from leadership, like you said, to spend some of your time every week helping someone navigate sounds super fun.
Yeah, and it sounds like a long time, but it's already working. Like as far as the pipeline is concerned, that's not why we're doing it. But like we're seeing these kids come back, and they come back in summer, and then sometimes they get hired. And so, we want these students to want to work in tech, and so it's working. The program's working.
That's awesome. Okay, so Erin asked a question in the chat, which she says, Alex, you have the most amazing background of anyone I know. How do you think your diverse background has shaped and benefited you in your current role?
Thanks, Erin. I think it's just about having an open mind. The reason, I'm open to so many different opportunities is I think you're referring to, I've traveled around the world and lived in different places, and I just didn't do things in a conventional manner. Like I said, I didn't go to college or grad school right out of so, I did a lot of self-exploration and met people from every thread. And so, and I still continue to do that. I would never be closed off to like any kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Cool. It looks like Marty has a question.
Marty does have a question. Alex, great presentation. I'm just curious from a standpoint of mentorship. I just got involved. I'm now a mentor with STEM. And so very curious when it comes to, I guess, interacting with and I guess motivating kids nowadays. And what challenges or maybe what advice would you give when it comes to interacting with or getting kids going? What channels do you go through to kind of get kids going now? Because it seems like with COVID's one challenge, and then kids are already segmented to begin with. It's like, how do you get to them? What are some advice you could give?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think for me, because they are still teenagers, and there needs to be a set of guardrails, right? Like, you can't just set them free, or they probably won't show up even, is just align expectations up front. And in those expectations are definitely like some rules, as we would consider them, but also things like, it's okay to have off days, acknowledging with them that like you have a lot going on, the world is on fire, but what I do expect from you is that you communicate to me that you're having an off day, that you don't just ghost or not show up or not communicate, because that is kind of the default teenage reaction to things.
Right.
And so just because they're not engaged doesn't mean that what you're doing and saying isn't impactful. And so just like laying it out ahead of time that it's okay to feel like you can't meet me this week, but I need to hear from you. And so approach it that way, and just acknowledge that that they have a lot going on.
Fabulous. Thank you.
All right. What about Victor?
Hey, Alex.
Hi.
Victor Villegas, Oregon State University Extension. I do quite a bit of K through 12 STEAM outreach and engagement, and specifically working with underserved, underrepresented youth. Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to hear more about what y'all do. But so I'm just trying to understand how the platform works. Is it online, in person, hybrid, combination of things? So how do the kids actually do the internships and receive the professional development training?
Yeah, so it used to be in person. It used to be after school, but like many companies in Portland, our offices are open, but no one is in them. so pluses and minuses to that. Pluses, as I mentioned, we were able to open it up now to kids in Baltimore and Texas and all over the place. So it is online. They log on. One thing that I've noticed is high schoolers, they seem to have a lot more flexibility in their schedule. So it's not always in the afternoon. Some high schoolers can meet at 1 or 2 p.m. Pacific. And so they log on, and then we do everything in Slack. And so they let us know that, when they're going to be on. They have a calendar that they keep, and then they meet with our mentor, and then they break off and do their own thing.
And is the program specifically to get youth in tech, or is it just upskilling in general?
Yeah, I would say both. But when I say tech, not necessarily STEM. So
right. That's why I do STEAM.
Yeah. So sales, you name it, marketing. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You got to reach everyone. I mean, sometimes the kids don't realize what working in tech looks like and what that can be, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just wearing a lab coat and and being a math whiz. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other positions. So thanks for what you do.
Yeah, often when I'm screening for resumes, less is more, at least for stuff into tech. So if you have a LinkedIn and you've developed robots and stuff, that's wonderful. And I think there should be a place for you. But I also look for kids who have been working at Wendy's and just, a good mix.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the questions from our audience. And thank you so much, Alex, for your time. I think we're right about at the end of our time. So I just wanted to put this up here for our November event that's coming up on November 11th. We'll be chatting with Shay Washington, who's a sales director at Slalom Consulting. And registration for that event is live at techoregon.org/events. I'll send out a registration link with the feedback survey for today's event. And with that, thank you for joining us today. Remember, I am Tech Oregon. Thank you so much to Alex for your time. And I hope you have a beautiful Thursday.
Yeah, please reach out. Alex Hernandez at OpenSesame.com. Thank you.
Great. Bye, everyone.
Bye.